Hi, everyone. I am so excited to have Audra today on YouTube to talk all about behavior and specifically behavior reduction. This is not my area of expertise, so I love bringing people on to talk more about behavior and behavior things because there's always room that I can grow in this area. So before we get too far into this, I'm going to have Audra go ahead and introduce herself. So why don't you tell everybody just a little bit about who you are and your experience in the classroom?
Cool. Hi, I am Audra Jensen, and I started my journey back in 1997 when I had a little boy. And then a couple years later was diagnosed with autism, and then we went on the whole journey of parenthood. And so early on, we were doing all of the therapies, you can name them all,
Mhm.
had some really nice experiences over the first few years. I found myself very involved in what he was doing, like most, good moms would do. And so after a number of years, I went, you know what? I can do this. And so I went back to school, got my master's degree in education, as well as my BCBA, which stands for Board Certified Behavior Analyst,
Mhm.
which is the certification for becoming an ABA provider. And then we moved, and I worked initially first I did a behavior program and a ABA or just a standard autism program. And then I moved into private practice. I opened up an ABA clinic, ran that for, a dozen years or so. So sold that, went back into education and taught in that capacity, as well as became the district BCBA. So I've kind of sat on all sides of the table,
Yeah.
had all the hats on, and now I just get to sit back and watch it all from afar.
Yes, I love that. It's such a fun journey when you are like the parent side of things and then you learn about the like educational side of things. Not that they're different, but it's a
Oh,
different
they are.
moment of like, I need to advocate for my child, but now I also know all the laws and regulations and things, as a
Yeah,
educator, as a, leader in the field. So yeah, that's a really fun journey. We're gonna have to bring you back on. I'm
anytime.
so intrigued to talk about like family side of things and then
Mhm.
also when you're in the field and know all of the things.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to bring you back for
Well,
sure.
it was really fun kind of seeing him, as a parent when he was, 2 years old and having all these, it was very obviously autistic behaviors at the
Yeah.
time. And then over the course of the years, having that journey. And then now he's 27 now.
Okay.
And he's able to live independently. He has a
Yeah.
career, he lives out of state. But he's still autistic. And so
Yeah.
we've been able to see that kind of whole gamut over the years with, teachers and therapists and all that stuff. So it's been kind of a fun journey.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so let's bring it back to behavior and why we're here. So for those who are maybe unfamiliar with the terminology, can you explain to us what is behavior reduction?
Sure. I would start with the understanding of the word behavior itself. Now, behavior, when we think of, if you haven't kind of been in the field, you think of behavior as something bad, and that's absolutely not what it is. So, behavior is really just a movement of some kind.
Mhm.
Something's happening. A behavior can be
Yeah.
anything from clapping and smiling to tantruming. A behavior is just
Mhm.
something that's happening. So, when we talk about behavior reduction, it's something that's happening that we want to reduce or eliminate. Now, usually that is what we're talking about challenging behaviors. And when we talk about challenging behaviors, we're talking about behaviors that are impeding that student from learning or from accessing their environment, from
Mhm.
being with peers. So anything, I mean, it could be simple things that are just maybe setting them aside. And we don't want that. We want them to be able to be as independent as they can, as socially confident as they can be, and to be internally happy as they can be. So anything that's
Mhm.
preventing them from doing that is what we would consider challenging behavior or maladaptive behavior that we would want to eliminate, reduce, or decrease, whatever works for the system for them.
Yeah. Yes, so we're just trying to remove, reduce that type of behavior, whatever the behavior is, positive, negative, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I know you've said maladaptive behavior. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Maladaptive behavior is just the term for either challenge. It's just they're all interchangeable. Challenging behavior, maladaptive behavior. And if you think about the word maladaptive, adaptive is being able to kind of adapt to your environment and something that's
Mhm.
functional. So mal coming from the word bad, which I don't
Mhm.
really like, but maladaptive means you're not able to access whatever you're doing. So it's something that's preventing you from accessing your environment.
Yes. And so that kind of leads me into like, then that's how you would know that a student needs a behavior reduction plan or a behavior
Yeah.
plan or whatever needs to be put into place, correct?
Yeah, and I think that something is to keep in mind is we have a lot of students, especially our autistic students, who have behaviors that are different from peers, whether they're self-stimulatory behaviors or noises they make. And a lot of those behaviors we really need to be mindful of. Is this really impeding their learning? Is this really harmful at all? Those
Mhm,
are type of behaviors we don't want to worry about reducing, or we don't want to change who they are. The only
mhm,
reason for really addressing challenging or maladaptive behavior is to help them access and be more happy, right?
yes.
So, we a lot of our autistic students in particular have behaviors that help them soothe, help
Mhm,
them cope with their environment. It also gives us clues into how they're feeling about their environment. If they're in
mhm,
an overstimulated system or overstimulated place, they may
mhm.
engage in some of these behaviors because that's telling us, maybe they don't have the words to communicate. This is too loud. This
Yeah.
hurts. My son over the years, he said all these years he would just be really weird outside at recess and stuff. And we live in the Pacific Northwest, so it rains a lot.
Mhm.
And so as he got older and got language, he was able to say, rain actually hurts me, hurts my skin. And
Mm.
I'm like, well, that makes more sense. We're always like, why are you making a big deal? It's just a little rain and stuff. Well,
Yeah.
to him, it was impactful. And so he
Mhm,
would have behaviors when we went out in the rain, unless he had coats and umbrellas and stuff.
mhm.
And later he was able to describe what it was. And so it's just always being mindful of who they are. Is it really, and I think that's the first question I always ask, is it really something that needs to be reduced?
Mhm,
It's just something we can teach the kids around. He's like, hey, it makes noises. It's totally fine. That's how he's soothing himself. And,
mhm.
so do we need to address the challenging behavior itself, or do we need to do more educating about our society or the kids and the people around him?
Yeah, I thank you for pointing that out because I do think there is a moment that we need to say, like, it is not for sensory needs or dysregulation that might be happening for that individual. This is more impacting their learning environment, impacting their access to the community, being harmful for themselves or others. Like
Mhm.
those high magnitude disruptions is more what we're talking about, not
Yeah.
the coping strategies and the self-stimulation that
Yeah.
is helpful for
I
individuals.
mean, anything that we just find annoying, don't worry about it.
No.
You
Yep.
get over it. You're an adult. You can get over
Yes. Yes. We
it.
move past it for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Um, so how would you, I don't know, decrease a student's, I don't know, biting? Maybe we should do biting. It's a concrete thing. We know a student has been biting more frequently. What would you say could be something we could do?
The first thing that I would do is go kind of take a few steps backwards. And so the very first thing you want to do with any behaviors, whether you're increasing, decreasing, you want to figure out what the function of that behavior is. So,
Mhm.
I mean, it could be very different. Maybe he's biting because you just gave him a math worksheet that he can't do. Maybe he's biting because he's hungry. Maybe he's
Mhm.
biting because he wants attention of the friend that has the toy that he wants to play with.
Mhm.
So there's different reasons why that biting. So the actual, what I always use is I use the term function over form. It's more important to me to figure out why this situation is happening, why the behavior is happening, rather
Mhm.
than what it looks like. So I would go back and I would go, okay, well, maybe he wants the attention of peers. So now we're going to teach him how to go up to a friend and say hi,
Mhm.
and that's going to help reduce the need to bite because he's now going to have a positive interaction.
Yeah.
So maybe he is hungry. So what we're going to do is we're make sure that we're feeding him at regular intervals. Now, I don't want to say he's trying to bite your arm off,
Mhm.
who knows? Or maybe he's engaging, and this is kind of the most common that I see, engaging in a behavior because they don't want to do something. So they're
Mhm.
escaping a demand, whether it's you've told them to do something, or they have to put away a toy, or they have to do this work or something. They're going to engage in some sort of behavior that gets them out of that. And a lot of times it does, without the education, a
Mhm.
student engages in a behavior that's a big behavior, and then you remove them from the situation. Well, you just then reinforced the
Mhm.
biting is now, I don't want to sit in circle time, so I'm going to bite my friend. And now the teacher's mad and makes me get out of the circle time. Like,
Mhm.
yay, that totally worked. I'm going to do that again. In fact,
Yeah.
next time I'm going to do it twice. It's whatever it is. And so I think it's just really important, whether we're talking about whatever the form is, whatever it looks like, we really want to look at why it's happening and then address that. And we'll find that once we address that, the forms kind of go away.
Yeah. And you recommend doing kind of figuring out why this is happening with some antecedent behavior consequence or an ABC
Yes.
type data.
That would be the kind of the first thing we do. And that's a very simple, anybody can do that.
Mhm.
ABC stands for what she said, antecedent. So what happens before behavior, what it actually looked like, and then consequence doesn't mean like consequence bad. It just means
Yeah.
what happened afterwards. And that's where we figure out what the function is. And so you can help, you as a teacher, you as a mom, you as, a behavior support person, anybody can just jot down some notes, so looking at it, or even step it back, the setting event, what is the situation? Is this happening at recess? Is this more often in the classroom? Is this happening when we ask to go brush the teeth? So
Mhm.
something is priming the pump for some behavior. And then there's a trigger, what we call the antecedent. Something's kind of then initiates kind of the need to engage in the behavior. So
Yeah.
we're going to look at that. Was he told to sit down? Was he,
Mhm.
did he see the toothbrush? Whatever it was that kind of triggered the behavior.
Mhm.
And then we want to kind of identify what those are. Is it biting? And if we're talking about, we don't want to just say tantrum. We want to know what it looked like. Did he
Mhm.
roll around on the ground? Was he screaming loud? So kind of defining what it looks like. And that helps us as we begin to create these data collection systems. If we have it really well identified, then we can see whether it's increasing or decreasing as we put interventions in place. And then that consequence, the thing that happens after, was he removed from the situation? Did he get attention from his peer? What was it that was happening? How long did it last? That's also good for behavior too, has how
Mhm.
long and how intense behavior is. So the consequence then is like, what is happening afterwards? And with that simple information, and what I usually do when I'm working with staff who are asking for help for students, I'll have them take this sort of jot down notes for
Mhm.
some time, not one thing, but several, whether it's, and I usually like at least 2 weeks of this type of data, so getting some information, and then you can start to see patterns, like it's
Yep.
always happening at recess, or
Mhm.
it's always happening with the math worksheet. And
Mhm.
then we can go back and we go, okay, now that we sort of know what's happening in kind of an anecdotal, storytelling type way, now
Mhm.
we're going to kind of pin down a really good data collection system where we can take good measurable data. And that's where kind of that middle behavior comes into play. So if you have a tantrum looks like falling on the ground, screaming, typically lasts about 5 minutes. And then we might say, okay, it starts when, the first yell happens that's really
Mhm.
loud, and it ends after, he's been calm for 2 minutes. And then you have a duration. So once we get all of that kind of pinned out, then
Mhm.
we can create a better data collection system.
Mhm.
It's more concrete that you probably need behavior support people to help generate. And then you start taking that type of data, you start putting interventions in place, say
Mhm.
he's looking for attention, we're going to add some functional communication, we're going to add
Mhm.
these things. And then over time, we're going to see, does that decrease over time?
Yeah.
That's a
So
lot of
that's
talking, sorry.
I know you're good. I was like, there's a lot of great points in there. I'm like, I feel like we need to make sure we're hitting on it being objective and defined,
Yep,
and clear. And
yep.
so everybody knows exactly what does this behavior look like? What was happening in that situation? So I love the way you're writing notes about the entire story of the scenario of what happened and what unfolded. Because then that gives you a better idea to pull it in. And I know lots of times we might see it in multiple settings or multiple different staff members. So it might not necessarily always be a location or a staff member. It could be the activity you're giving them, or it could be time of day. It's right before
Mhm,
lunch, right? Take all these things into consideration. And I love that sometimes behavior, you have to be curious because if it is like always happening right before lunch, you're like, this time is what
mhm,
is defining it for me.
mhm.
So yeah, it's really, really interesting how we always do behaviors. All of us, we all have behaviors, not positive, negative, right?
Right,
And how we shape things sometimes depends on what's going on in my life. Or, I
right,
put my clothes out in the morning so that I know what I'm wearing the next day. So it sets me up for a better day. But if I
right.
don't put my clothes out, then I'm scrambling to figure out what to wear and it takes me longer to get ready, right? So we all have our own behaviors too that we put together.
Idiosyncrasies.
Yes. Something else that I do, I feel like I've loved more because again, behavior is not my heart and soul, but proactive supports, things that we can put in place ahead of time to help diminish potentially some of those behaviors that teachers might see in the classroom. So, what do you suggest that teachers can do proactively to support their classroom?
So when talking about proactively preventing behaviors, you're going to go back to kind of that antecedent, that before stuff, and not worry so much about the behaviors. When we're talking about proactive, we're talking about what can we do? What changes could we make the environment? What changes could we make in ourselves? What changes could we make? All of that before stuff so that the student doesn't even have to get to the behaviors. I mean, if we can prevent a behavior from happening and then not having to react to the behavior, that's so much better for the student. It's better for the
Mhm.
staff. It's better for the teachers, for the family setting. So we don't want our kids to be in crisis and having these maladaptive behaviors that are really hard for them as well,
Mhm.
whatever we can do beforehand. So thinking about, again, so if you have a student that behaviors really are heightened right before lunch, maybe they're hungry. If you can figure that out, then maybe you're going to have a snack and half an hour before lunch
Mhm.
because they need it then. Or if you figured out that it's because they want the attention of the peers, and you're going to go back and you're going to start thinking about what can we do? Can we set it up so that the first engagement that they have with a peer, they have the functional language to say, let's play, whatever
Mhm.
we can do beforehand. So it's just kind of that point of thinking ahead and what can we do to support them to change the environment. Maybe they need to sit closer to the teacher or in a
Mhm.
smaller setting, so thinking everything beforehand, what can we do to prevent it from even happening?
Yeah, for sure. And as you're reading through IEPs and getting to know your students and all those things, that's always a great way to just like be curious about like, okay, it seems like this behavior is coming from this. Let me try to put a schedule in place to let them know what's coming next. Or let me try to give them a timer that counts down to when their end of their activity is so that they don't get overwhelmed when I say put the toy away. Again, just trying to think of some of those things that could be helpful, like visual supports, schedules, any type of reminders ahead of time when things are ending is always really good. Visuals, written, everything. Like I'm just like trying to think out loud here, but I know I'm repeating myself. But there's lots of things that we can put in place. The classroom setup, the classroom layout, where certain things are located can help reduce some behaviors.
Right. And I've had teachers say, well, I shouldn't have to bribe the student to behave right, and there's a really important distinction between that bribery and positive reinforcement, which is what we're setting up is a positive environment reinforcement, is
Mhm.
that bribery is something that happens in the moment of a challenging behavior that we give to a student in order to stop the behavior.
Mhm.
So think of it like a parent takes a child into the store. The child goes into the store, then she starts to tantrum because she wants the candy, and the parent gives the candy, and then the behavior stops. So she's like, well, I fixed it, but I had to bribe it.
Mhm.
Positive reinforcement is going to happen before a behavior even happens. You're going to set up a situation before so that they can earn or work through the behavior, whatever, to earn whatever they're interested in.
Mhm.
So in the same scenario, the child going in with the parent to the store, before you go into the store, you're going to have this talk. Okay, we're going to get bread, milk, and butter, and you're going to help me with that. And as soon as we get through the checkout line with this, whatever
Mhm.
expectation you have,
Mhm.
then I've got a treat for you. So you're setting it all up
Mhm.
beforehand. You're preventing that behavior. You can even catch, maybe you start to see the anxiety heighten when you walk through the candy aisle, whatever it
Yeah.
is. You're like, remember, we're going to do this, this, and this, and I've got the treat for you at the end. So you're preventing that behavior from happening. And
Mhm.
that's reinforcement. So it's sometimes hard for a teacher to understand, well, I shouldn't have to give them, something to make
Yeah.
them. Well, you're setting it up beforehand, and
Mhm.
that's going to increase. So in the bribery situation, you're going to increase the tantrum behavior because you've reinforced that.
Mhm.
In a positive reinforcement system, you're going to be reinforcing that positive behavior because you've set it up and then they've achieved it.
Yes, yes. I'm gonna make an example kind of applicable to teachers. So you woken up in the morning, you got up early, you said you were gonna get three things done, get dressed and out the door by 7 a.m. and you did it. So you're like, great, I'm gonna reward myself with Starbucks. Happens all the time, right? And then if you don't do it and you're running late and you're scrambling and you're like, oh, I don't have time for Starbucks, you're gonna be so sad when you get to work and all of your coworkers have Starbucks. And so just think about it that way of yes, I know I've told myself I can get Starbucks if I leave my house on time, but if I leave late, I can't get Starbucks, right? It's kind of that scenario.
Yep. Just thinking ahead.
Yes, exactly. So again, proactively telling your student, your child, this is what's going to happen. Maybe somewhere in the middle of that, you remind them this is what's going on. You're going to get this Skittles at the end or an ice
Mhm.
cream or whatever you've said that they were
Whatever they
looking for,
like.
a toy, whatever, a YouTube video, whatever it
Yeah.
is, right? You've let them know it's coming and you'll get it at the end. So I love that. Is there anything else that you want teachers to know about behavior or behavior reduction?
I think one of the most important things when we think about reducing behavior is that we should never put any sort of system in place where we're reducing a behavior that's getting a student a need met
Mhm.
without teaching them a skill that replaces that. So always thinking about, okay, they're doing this behavior. We figured that all out. We've talked about that. We figured out the behaviors for this purpose. Give them something else to do that gives them the same access. So the whole
Mhm.
point of figuring out that function is saying they need this, but we need to get there in a different way so that they
Mhm.
can access their environment and be pleased. And so, and I think of it a lot like, so you have to make a path down a forest, right? You're going to cut a path down a forest. You're going to think about what are we first going to chop down. It's not going to be the tiny little pebbles. It's going to be the big trees and the big rocks. So focusing on those big things first and not worrying about the little things.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, we want to make sure that we're not just taking it away, we're giving the student something else to do so they can still have that need met. Because behavior is communication. They're saying something with their behavior. So we want to make sure we're not taking that communication away. We're giving them something else to do. So giving them, and a lot of times it's functional language or it's visuals or it's
Mhm.
something that they can have access to doing so that you're replacing that behavior with something else.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. Do you have any other resources or website links that you can share with us to talk more about behavior, or where can people find you?
Sure. So I'm ABA in school and just abainschool.com or on TPT or wherever. You
Mhm.
find me on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. You can email me, Audra at abainschool.com. So that's me. I think the biggest, um, I'll tell you this. My favorite behavior book that I'll tell you about is
Yeah,
called, and maybe we talked about this before in our last one. Did we
I
talk
think
about
so.
this with you?
Maybe.
So it's called, it's by Chris Voss. I'll get you the link for it. The name is escaping me, but he was a FBI hostage negotiator.
Mm,
Has nothing to do with education. It's nothing to do with special education at all. But it's
okay.
fascinating to see
Yeah.
him. He's worked with obviously the most challenging people and situations that we will probably never have to deal with, but they're probably little kids that we started with. So and he goes through his way of making a challenging situation collaborative
Okay.
and working with. And so there's some really good strategies. And just when you're talking about challenging behaviors, is how can we get the student on board with whatever we're doing? And I think that's really important that we're not
Mm,
just forcing the student to do something. We
yeah.
want them on board with it. We want whatever skill we're teaching them to get them what they need, even easier, faster, and better than the behavior that they had. And
Mm.
so, yeah, I'll send you a link. It's really good. It's just a
Yeah.
regular way, super easy read too.
I did do a quick search. Is it Never Split the Difference?
Yes, that's
Negotiating
it.
it as if your life depended on it.
It's
Yeah, I will make sure to
fascinating,
leave the link
super
below.
easy.
Yes, for sure. Awesome. I will probably pick up that book as well, just so I can kind of touch up on some of my negotiation tactics.
Works really well with our little bit older, a little bit more verbal.
Yeah,
The negotiation stuff's always going
love
back and
that.
forth. Yes.
Always looking for new things. So thank you so much, Audra, for being here. We really do appreciate it.
Anytime.